And welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So I thought what I might do, see if I can find it, is let's see how this shows up. Right now it's showing nothing, but on my screen share was to show you how many entries there were in the Jastrow dictionary. Let's see if anything shows up. Oh, there it is. Look at this. Okay, this is where it starts. There's the word. Okay, it starts right here, right? Failure, sin, lots of, Jastrow's so brilliant, didn't have a computer, but look at all the references he gives. When I was teaching at Schechter, if we'd actually find an example that he gave of what we were studying of the word, right? If in his reference, he actually quoted something we were actually studying, I'd tell them it was a jackpot Jastrow. Look at this, line drawn, and he says, this is the root here. It also, look at the word chita, which means wheat. Look at this, lots and lots of entries. Right, here we go. Oh boy, lots of sinning, right? Mistake, inadvertence, sin, sacrifice, right? We had this one, right? Sin offering to expiate it. It also can have to do with stumbling. Also, okay, so this is no longer the word. We're moving on. Okay, we're going to the next. Here, we're going to go to the next page. See if I can. Let me see if I can. Yeah, there we go. All right. So let's keep going. There might be some connection here, although the word is chet, tet, aleph, and an aleph and a hey aren't as connected as, say, an aleph and a yud. But let's just keep going. All right, so no other here we go. Here's the next one. See how it's related? All these. Polish, cleanse, prepare. There's the word we used, right?
We also use sprinkle.
Yes, I did. So I'm going to have to see if I possibly can get away with that.
Well, because my thought is it's part of the prep or part of the process that,
preparing. Yes, let's see.
Of doing the.
Be proud, all more of these things. Used to comfort, tender, delicate, generous. Look at this. All these things. Here we go. See that? There's my sprinkle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did I just hit the wrong? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Here we are. Look at this. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Keep going. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. Very few words have so many, entries in the dictionary for that. So I just wanted to point that out to you so that it wasn't, when I said it wasn't an easy word necessarily to translate, I wasn't kidding. All right, so I'm going to go back now to our regular place. Let's see, here we are. Okay, there we are. So I was debating with myself today whether to do this particular Torah Temimah with you, because it does start to get technical. But I think that we'll take it as we can and see if it's nevertheless helpful. So I'm trying to balance the Rashi, which is just diving in for the first time into Mefarshim, into commentators. And of course, when we get to that's a basic level commentary. And on the other hand, when we look at Torah Temimah, we are now looking at pretty sophisticated stuff. So I'm just trying to balance it. Hopefully, the main thing is, are you enjoying it? So this is the point that we had yesterday. We had Rashi's comment on Tet Vav. Right, here's Tet Vav. Vayikach et tzir hachatat asher la'am. He took the goat of the sin offering, which was the people's. Vayishchateu v'chateu karishon. Right? He slaughtered it and he prepared it like the first. So notice that here it says karishon. In other words, like the first chatat. So it sounds like it would be Aaron's. Remember, Aaron had to bring a sin offering as well. He brought the calf, and here we have the goat, and saying that essentially he had to go prepare it in exactly the same way. So then it says something a little differently. Now it says, Vayakrev et ha'olah. He presented the olah offering, Vayasehu kamishpat. Uses a different word. It doesn't say karishon. It says kamishpat, according to its ordinances. And, I think to myself, and I may have mentioned this, I'm pretty sure I have, that doing this is like detective work. And you'll notice that if you watch detective movies or read detective novels, what happens is they notice things that the average person wouldn't notice. And very often they are able to crack the case because they're noticing something that's a little bit out of the usual. And this is one such example. In other words, yes?
JPS says regulation.
Yes.
According to regulation.
Right. So mishpat
Right.
is the word that they use for judgment. Judgment, law, according to its laws.
Yep.
Okay. So it's a little, so this is what he's going to do. So Rashi pulls it up this way, Vayaseh kamishpat. He's noticing that as well. And he says, Hamafurash be'olat nedava. He said, which was detailed out, specified regarding the olat nedava vayikra. So let me try and translate that, mystify.
What verse are you doing?
This is
What's Vav in English?
And Het Zion is what we just looked at.
Zion, whatever. What verse is that?
That would be verse 16.
From what chapter?
That would be chapter 9.
Oh, so we've gone kind of back from what we've done?
We tried to stop at Sh'mini, maybe got a little bit further than that.
Okay, but this is back in Rishon.
Yes, it's just the last verse of Rishon, actually.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
Rashi's pulling this out. He's noticing this, and he says the reason why it says mishpat hamefurash, which is specified regarding the olat nedava, which means the free will offering, the free will olah, which is mentioned in Vayikra, in Parshat Vayikra. That was the first Parsha of Leviticus. Remember, the very first offering it talks about was an olah, and there are laws that go along with that. And he says that's what this is referring to. In other words, this olah isn't referring, when it says kamishpat, it doesn't mean Aaron's olah. It means the olah mentioned in Leviticus. Pretty smart. That's certainly not a slam dunk. So then we go back here. So here's now, of course, Torah Temimah. Vayaseha kamishpat. So he says, he's quoting Beitzah, Kaf Aleph, the tractate Beitzah, page 20a. Notice here it just says Beitzah Kaf. It doesn't give you everything, but it's the same reference that he's pulling this from. The cross-referencing, by the way, is actually, it's so easy to overlook it, but there's so much work involved and so much scholarship involved in being able to do cross-references. At any rate, Vayaseh kamishpat. Kamishpat olat nedava. So he says the same thing. He says, but just a little more tersely, according to the rules, according to the laws of the free will olah. And he says, lamed al olat chova. So we learn here regarding a chova. That's the difference. Nedava means free will. Chova means obligatory, right? So process the difference between that, right? One is you want to do it. The other is you got to do it. It's not up to you. This is a commandment now. Shetu'una smicha, that it requires smicha. What do we mean by smicha? This is important. Okay, so when they would bring an offering, they would lean heavily on the horns of the animal. That is, the person bringing the offering had to hold onto the horns and press down on the horns. And that was, this is something we've referenced before in the sense that it was symbolically saying that you are now attached to the animal. The animal is part of you. Remember, we discussed a little bit some of the inner dynamics of bringing offerings. So now, not all, right? If this one requires it, you can assume that there are others that don't require it. And Baruch Halevi Epstein is going to get off on this. Okay, so here we go. This is where he starts. Nir'eh hakavana. It appears that the implication or the intention al pima shekatuv b'Torat Kohanim is based on what is written in the Sifra. Remember I've referred to that before. That's this halachic midrash on Leviticus, Vayaseho Kamishpat, where Torat Kohanim. Remember the way this is organized. This midrash is organized. Is it follows the verses of the Torah and comments on the different verses. An example of this, by the way, I think, would be found in your Haggadah, in the Magid section, where they take the verses Arami Oved Avi from Deuteronomy, and they split it apart, they go over each verse and then comment on it. That's the style that we're looking at. So here we go. Ma'olah te'una hafshet. So just as the olah requires, this is the laws of the olah, right? It requires hafshet, which means skinning. The nituach, this has to do with flaying. The kalil leishim, and completely burnt. The omed bitzad hamizbeach, and he stands on the side of the altar. V'zorek et ha'evarim, and literally it means he throws the pieces, the limbs, of zokein. So this too, he has to do this with this particular olah as well. Uma olah, and just going into even more deeply issues, and just as an olah, im pak'u evarim me'al hama'aracha, if pieces of the olah, this thing is burning away, and fire, can sputter. This stuff is moist, and so it might be sputtering, and it might give this really big sputter, and so some pieces of the offering spring off the altar. Of ma'aracha means where it's laid upon the altar on the fire. Machsirim lema'aracha. You have to take those pieces and put them back on the ma'aracha, on the fire. Af zu kain. And that has to do with this too. This is the mishpat of the olah, of this olah. The omnam, however, lefize hava leili michtav, he should have written, right? Vayasehu karishona. He made it like the first, right? He could have said that. Could have said like the first. Ukamo dichtiv b'pasuk hakodem. And just as is written in the previous pasuk, because we have to go back here, but you see, it says, Vaychatehu karishon. So the question is, why is he isn't saying karishon either here? He's not saying it here. Ulashon zeh. And so this language, sorry, this language, haya kolel, it would have, had he said, like the first, it would have included kolel, kol hapratin, would have included all the specifics, the hadinim, and all the laws, shahayu ba'olah rishona, which were applied to that first olah, shehi olat aharon, which is Aaron's olah. Haya gam ba'olah zo, that would have applied to this olah as well. Shehi olat hatzibur, which in this case is the public offering. However, im haya omer chen, if this had it said karishona, haya b'mashma, it would have implied shegam le'inyan smicha, that with regard to smicha, right? That with regards to smicha, leaning on the offering or the animal, haya shaveh ba'ola zo, it would have applied also to this olah, kamo ba'olah rishona, just as Aaron had to do with his offering. Because we know with an olat nidava, when a person presents such an animal, he has to lean on the animal. Uve emet lo hayu bazeh shavim. But in truth, the two offerings were not identical in this regard. Kizo, okay, because this one, the Ireba, which it's talking about, this is he olat hatzibur, refers to a public offering. The olat tzibur, and with regard to a public offering, ein te'una smicha, it does not require smicha, kemavoar, as is explained by Menachot. It's detailed out in the tractate Menachot, page 92a. Ma she'eno kain. However, this did not apply. Ola rishona, okay? Mishna kain ola rishona haita te'una smicha. This first offering, I believe is what he's saying, required smicha. For afalpi, and despite the fact, she'olat chovahi, despite the fact that this was a requisite offering, this was an offering that was commanded by Hashem. For alze amar kan, and regarding this, he says here, the scripture, the text says, kamishpat. It's like the laws, olat nedava lamed. He's saying you have to learn it out like the olat nedava, the chule, etc. Ritzono lomar, and what he wants to say is, delachen lo kativ vayaseho karishona. The reason it didn't, for this reason, it says he made it. It doesn't say vayaseho karishona. He did it like the first. Lohorot, to teach, shelo mamash karishona haita, because it wasn't absolutely like the first, the chol hapratim, regarding all the details. Kili inyan smicha, because regarding the issue of smicha, of leaning on the animal, lo heita shaveh larishona, it could not be equivalent to the first offering, shehaita tmu'a smicha, because that one required smicha, afal pi shechovahi, even though it was a chovah. So this is when I said it gets technical. I wasn't kidding, okay? Because when it says the first one, again, this would be Aaron's offering, right? Ela le'inyan sha'arei dvarim, but only with regard to other matters, the other details, hachashuvim b'torat kohanim kamo shekatuv, which are detailed out, which are listed in the Torat Kohanim, in the Sifra, as is written here. There's just another 3 lines, so I'll keep going. Ulefize, and so we can deduce mimela, automatically, mevu'ar she'olat chova tu'ana smicha, that we have to say that an obligatory offering requires smicha, shaharei ola rishona shel chova hata, because the original offering was a chova. And I think here we're talking about Aaron's offering, which he was told he had to bring, the imlochen, because if we don't say, yes, the imlo, I think this is the imlo hachi, okay? If we don't argue that way, hava le'lemar, it should have said, vayaseho karishona. He just gives you another cross reference here. He says, check out Tosafot. It's the Tosafot on the Gemara, the sugya kan in this particular sugya, meaning this discussion in Beitzah. All right. So it's convoluted, but essentially he's saying that I guess what I really was trying to bring out was the amount of analysis that goes into this kind of stuff to be able to bring out all these specifics. You know, we say God is in the details, and this might be an example of it. Okay. Any comments before I get myself into more trouble?
Well, it's just that I wish Shirabeth was here to see that Jastro for one thing.
Right, right. Well, remember, this is being recorded, so if she,
That's true.
on Shabbos, if she wants to look at it, she will see it.
And then she could hear me say that I wish you were here.
That's right, exactly. All right. We're going to go, yes? And this is another comment. I will continue.
So, but one more thing.
Yes.
So the phrase "like the first," you know, and I think there was a Rashi that was saying that meant it was like Aaron's. That
Correct.
meant it was Aaron's, but this is kind of disregarding that and just using it as just the normal first.
Okay, yes, that is correct. That my understanding of this Rashi is that he's making the point that it's not comparing it to Aaron's offering, it's comparing it to the laws of the Olah. And it could be that the reason why we are saying this, oh, yeah, I mean, that is the smicha, that even though this was a public offering, we're saying, I guess, that in this particular case, he had to do it, you know, but with smicha. And it could be that the takeaway from this is saying that when it is a chovah, when the olah is a required sacrifice, it has to be, there has to be smicha. And what's happening here is that there's this, on the one hand, when it's a public offering, it doesn't require smicha if it's on behalf of the public. On the other hand, it's a chovah offering, and what it could be saying is that in that particular case, it requires smicha. Now, I have true confessions. I am still having, I'm having some concern because I'm trying to think of an example of a public offering that wasn't a chovah. But I would have to think that is an obligatory offering. But it's quite possible that the public might choose to bring a non-obligatory offering. And I'm not sure if for example, they would bring extra offerings on the altar, like the Kates HaMizbeach or Kayetz HaMizbeach, which were not obligatory. They were bringing it on behalf of the public, meaning, and a public offering means that it's brought from public funds. That's what we have to understand. And so those olot would not necessarily, they wouldn't require smicha, but in this particular case, because it's a required offering, it requires smicha. And I apologize for being awfully technical.
I need a chart.
I know.
I know there's so many names for the various types of offerings and breakdowns of each one. And I need a chart. I need a visual.
So I know we have to quit in a moment, but basically you can divide sacrifices into two major categories. One is free will, right? Voluntary and obligatory.
Right.
That's a good way to start.
So that's the start with the
start. That's the
Nidaveh and the Hova, right? Nidaveh and right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Now,
Now,
because we get these terms now after I've written all these notes, and it's like, dang it, I got to go back.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Generally, if a person is bringing an individual offering, and my guess is that whether it's obligatory or not, they have to lean on the animal. But if it's a non-obligatory public offering, they do not. There's no requirement. Okay. But if it's a public offering that is an obligatory offering, they do have to lean on it. This is
Okay.
almost sounding like tax code.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop the share. And so we can take any, hi Judith, any other comments, and then I'm going to stop the recording.
Mm.
So, and we'll be on next week to either, I think it's going to be Tazria Matzora next week. By the way,
Yay.
yeah, I know this is
Everybody's favorite.
the premier bar mitzvah portion, dealing with what is called leprosy. Yes. Wow. So at any rate, the thing is that this particular, I'll leave you with this thought, and that is that this particular parsha deals with, as I said, the installation of Aaron and his sons. It includes, unfortunately, the death of Nadav and Avihu, and that in itself has some interesting statements about what you do in the cases of tragedy, and how that affects the halacha. So what's so amazing about, and it's almost, maybe I can call it almost a Zen element of the Torah, because of the fact that we have, on the one hand, this sense of mitzvah and obligation, and on the other hand, life happens. And how do you work these two things out when life happens? And then we move on to the laws of kashrut, and what animals are permissible and what animals are not permissible. And we also raise the issue of purity, that eating a non-kosher animal renders a person impure. So we now have a spiritual issue going on as well. And the takeaway from the fact that these two are juxtaposed in our parsha, I'd like to suggest that when we keep the laws of kashrut, when we try to observe that kind of sense of this meticulous element of eating, right, and how important food is, and we've touched on that before, it is akin to Aaron and his sons being installed into the priesthood. There's an equivalence.
Do the rabbis ever talk about why Nadab and Abihu tried to do this on their own?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I know I have to finish in a second.
Oh, I know.
Okay, no, I can answer the question relatively quickly.
Oh, good.
There actually is, I know, surprise. There actually is a discussion as to whether or not they were sainted, whether they were sinners. Was it chutzpahdik on their part, or were they so driven by a desire to perform and to serve God? And were they actually martyrs? And that of course, the details regarding that discussion.
Okay.
But
All right.
And isn't there one that about them being drunk?
Yes, there absolutely is, which of course fall on the sinner side of things. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Be well, everyone.